Alright, let's break it down because Bills Mafia has been on edge lately, and for good reason. We're just a few days into training camp, and the injury list already feels longer than the offensive playbook. It's the same story every year. Fans' panic timelines flood with updates, and suddenly everyone's a doctor. But if you zoom out a bit, you'll realize not everything on that list is worth losing sleep over. Let's start with the most common culprit, soft tissue injuries. Hamstrings, groins, calves, all those delicate muscle groups that get strained when you're pushing your body at full speed after a long off season. These aren't freak injuries, they're expected. Every single NFL training camp sees this uptick. Why? Because no matter how hard these guys train in the off season, nothing replicates the intensity of football. It's not just running in a straight line. It's changing direction, adjusting mid-air, reacting on instinct, absorbing contact, and all of it at full throttle. That's where soft tissue gets angry. Now, when we talk about these injuries, most fall under the mild category, what medical folks call a grade 1 strain. It's more tightness and discomfort than a full-blown tear. These are the types of things that if it were the regular season, players might tape up and play through. But this is camp. It's about ramping up, not burning out. Teams, especially ones with playoff aspirations like Buffalo, are going to err on the side of caution. That's why we're seeing some guys get pulled early or miss a couple practices. No need to risk long-term damage for a few extra reps in July, but not all soft tissue injuries are created equal. You do have to keep an eye on the guys who have a history. Someone like Terrell Bernard, for instance. He's dealt with hamstring and pectoral issues before, so the team might give him extra time, maybe even the full 2 weeks just to be safe. These recurring cases are where things can start to turn chronic if not managed right. But if we're talking about first-time tweaks, those are usually nothing to panic over. Then you have the more dramatic moments like Brian Thompson Shavers. He went down with what looked like a serious ankle injury. Reports said he screamed out in pain, had to be consoled by teammates, and was carted off the field. That's the kind of scene that instantly sends fans spiraling, but turns out it was a low ankle sprain, the best case scenario in that situation. Low ankle sprains are typically 1 to 2 weeks, maybe less, if the player responds well to treatment. It's the high ankle sprains and fractures you really have to watch for, and thankfully this doesn't seem to be one of those. Another situation worth monitoring is Spencer Brown. He's been on the sideline with what we know is related to his back, and that raises some red flags. Brown has a history of back surgery, and when a lineman starts having recurring back issues, it's not just a week-to-week problem. That's something that could linger all season if not handled properly. We're talking about a position where leverage, power, and balance are everything, and the lower back is crucial for all of that. The team is clearly being cautious, probably holding him out until after the red and blue scrimmage. But let's be honest, everyone's crossing their fingers that he's ready for week 1. Continuity on that offensive line was a huge reason why Josh Allen was one of the least sacked quarterbacks last season, and Brown is a big part of that equation. Speaking of red flags, the most unexpected name on the injury report might be Tyler Bass. And what makes this situation so bizarre is the description, pelvic pain. Not hip, not groin, pelvic. That's a very specific, very rare designation. When teams use that term, it often points to something like osteitis pubis. That's inflammation right at the pubic symphysis where the two sides of the pelvis meet. Deep down in a spot you never want to be sore, especially if you're a kicker. It can feel like a bone bruise, and when it flares up, it's not only painful, but can throw off a player's balance and power. For someone like Bass, who relies on a precise motion and explosive leg swing, even minor discomfort in that area can have a big impact on accuracy and distance. And look, this could still be a minor thing. Maybe he slipped on a wet field during a rainy practice and tweaked something. But if it's more serious, if there's bone marrow edema or deeper inflammation, that's the kind of injury that can drag on for weeks or even months. It's not unheard of for players to require injections or extended rest to recover from something like this. That's why fans and coaches alike are holding their breath. A kicker with a pelvic injury. That's not something you hear every day, and it's definitely not something you want to see linger into the regular season. Now let's talk about Dalton Kincaid, because this one has people scratching their heads. He missed a chunk of last season with a PCL sprain in his left knee. No surgery was performed, which is typical for PCL injuries since that ligament isn't as crucial to knee stability as the ACL. But he's been back on the injury report again, and the concern is that this might be a lingering issue. When a PCL Sprain is significant enough to keep a player out for 4 to 6 weeks. It can sometimes leave the knee feeling unstable. Not enough to require surgery, but enough to cause recurring swelling or discomfort, especially under high load. So now fans are wondering, was the original injury more serious than we thought? Is this something that's going to flare up all season? Possibly. Or maybe it's a new bump, a minor irritation, or just precautionary management. Either way, it's worth noting, especially for a young player that the Bills are counting on to take a step forward this year. There was a lot of talk this offseason about Kincaid needing to bulk up, get stronger, and avoid being bullied in coverage. Yet here we are again looking at a knee that won't fully cooperate. That viral photo from OTAs showing him skinny with double knee braces, not exactly the image you want burned into the fan base's memory heading into a new season. And then there's Dorian Williams, a critical depth piece at linebacker, especially considering the lack of experience behind Matt Milano. Williams showed up in a boot after what's been described as a calf strain. The next day, he was spotted, wearing just a compression sleeve, which is promising, but make no mistake. If a player is put in a boot immediately after the injury, that means there was real pain and possibly some swelling involved. It's not nothing. We're probably looking at a 2 to 3 week timeline, maybe 4 if the team wants to be extra conservative. And sure, he's not a starter, but he's a guy who could see meaningful snaps in 3 linebacker sets, or if Milano needs a breather. Losing those camp reps is not ideal. And speaking of Milano, now this is where things get interesting. Everyone's excited to see him back, and he's back moving well, looking fast. But if you watch closely, you'll see the difference. When he's coming downhill attacking the run or blowing up a screen, he looks like the old Milano, that straight line. Explosion is still there, but in coverage, that's where the questions start. In one-on-one drills, he got absolutely dusted by James Cook. Not just beat, but left in the dust. 6, maybe 7 yards of separation. After the rep, he even looked like he was shaking out his knee a little. Nothing dramatic, but noticeable. That tells us something. Downhill speed is one thing, but lateral movement and change of direction, that might not be back to 100%. And that's a big deal for a linebacker who's been elite in coverage. Think of it like Von Miller. Last year, coming off the ACL, he was serviceable, but he wasn't Von. That first year back is almost never clean. Milano might be able to play downhill all day, but when he's got to track a tight end in the flat or chase a shifty back and man coverage, that's where things could get dicey. And finally, let's give a quick nod to Keon Coleman. He's been a bit of a fan favorite early in camp. And yeah, he's flashed. But don't get it twisted. This is a guy who wins with size and physicality, not separation. In shells and shorts, he's going to look average. When the pads come on, that's when he starts to shine. He had a solid showing in the rain, muscling through contact and showing he can make tough catches. That's what you want from a big-bodied receiver. He's not going to be the guy burning corners downfield, but he'll be the one out muscling them. At the catch point, as long as he cleans up those drops. So yeah, it's been a hectic start to camp for the Bills, but not everything is doom and gloom. Some injuries are just part of the process. Others deserve a closer look, and a few, like Bass's pelvic situation, might be a real cause for concern. The key now is watching how the team manages each case moving forward, especially with week 1 creeping closer every day. And with all that said, what's becoming increasingly clear is that this training camp is as much about damage control as it is about evaluation. The Bills are walking a fine line here, trying to get their guys' condition locked in and ready for the season while not pushing anyone to the point where a small issue becomes a long-term problem. It's a delicate balance. One extra rep might be the difference between a player finding rhythm and that same player tweaking a hamstring that sets him back for a month. That's the reality teams face every day in camp, and it's why veteran management is such a massive part of this process. You look at someone like Leonard Floyd last year, or even Von Miller before his setback. The way their reps were managed early on made a huge difference in how available they were when the game started to matter. That's the approach the Bills seem to be taking with guys like Bernard and Milano. The coaching staff knows that these players don't need 10 extra reps on a Tuesday afternoon in July. What they need is to be healthy and functional in December. Now, when the playoff race heats up, that kind of foresight is what separates good teams from great ones, and Buffalo is absolutely playing the long game right now. But let's not ignore what all these injuries mean in the short term. Every guy that's out creates a ripple effect. It gives younger players a shot at more reps, more film, and a chance to make their case. That's especially true in the linebacker room where the depth is looking thin. With Dorian Williams sidelined and Bernard nursing a hamstring, someone like Balon Spector might get more looks than originally planned. And the results so far have not inspired a ton of confidence. He's been exposed at times in both run and pass situations, and the coaching staff knows that's not sustainable if something happens to Milano mid-season. That's why there's growing buzz about whether Buffalo needs to look outside the building for linebacker help before the season kicks off. Because relying on raw, inconsistent depth in the heart of your defense, that's how you end up giving up 150 rushing yards to a third string back on a cold Sunday in November. And that brings us to the larger conversation roster. Health is already influencing position battles. Take the offensive line, for instance. With Spencer Brown still on the sideline and no definitive timetable for his return, Tyneezy Grail has been turning heads again. Just like he did last year before getting hurt. He's showing consistency in drills, anchoring well in pass protection, and even flashing some versatility. He's not the same physical presence as Brown, but right now availability might trump upside. And if Grail continues to stack good days, it's not crazy to think the coaching staff might consider opening week 1 with him in the lineup if Brown isn't 100%. Continuity is great, but health is greater. Now circling back to Tyler Bass, the uncertainty around his situation really shifts how you look at the special teams unit as a whole. Bass has been one of the more consistent kickers in the league, both in terms of field goals and kickoffs, and his accuracy has been a stabilizing force for this team. If that consistency suddenly becomes questionable because of pelvic pain or a lingering groin issue, it forces the staff to think about contingencies. Are you bringing in a camp leg to lighten the load? Are you giving reps to a free agent just in case? Because the truth is, if Bass isn't fully healthy, by the time September rolls around, the margin for error gets razor thin. And in the AFC, where playoff seeding could come down to a single game or a single kick, that's not a risk you want to take. The mental aspect can't be overlooked here either. For a kicker, the motion is everything. It's not just about physical health. It's about trust. Trust in your body, trust in your swing, trust in the mechanics that have been honed for years. If Bass is feeling even a little off, that doubt starts to creep in. It affects timing, it affects decision making. You hesitate for half a second and suddenly you're hooking a chip shot left. And that's how games get lost. So even if this injury sounds minor, even if it's just a bit of soreness, it has the potential to become a massive storyline if not handled carefully. And speaking of trust, is what the coaching staff is banking on when it comes to Dalton Kincaid. They trust that his knee can hold up, that the swelling is manageable, and that the lack of muscle mass we keep hearing about won't translate to more injuries. But that trust is going to be tested if we keep seeing him on and off the injury report. You don't want to be in a position where you're holding your breath every time he makes a cut over the middle. The guy has real upside. His hands route running and feel for space are elite, but none of that matters if his body can't absorb the grind of an NFL season. And we're not even talking about violent contact here. We're talking about planting, redirecting, shifting weight on a joint that's already shown signs of instability. What complicates this even more is the expectations that were placed on him after his rookie season. There's a hunger in the fan base to see him become the safety blanket for Josh Allen, especially with some turnover in the receiving core. But expectations are heavy, and the pressure to deliver can weigh on a player who's not 100%. It creates a feedback loop where minor soreness becomes major anxiety, and that's how performance starts to dip. So yeah, it's not a doomsday situation yet, but the red flags are fluttering, and the team has to keep a very close eye on how he responds over the next few weeks. Meanwhile, Keon Coleman continues to be one of the most interesting stories in camp. He's big physical and has that alpha dog mentality you want from an outside receiver, but he's also raw in a lot of ways. His hands are still inconsistent. His footwork can be a little clunky off the line. And most importantly, he doesn't create a ton of separation. That's not necessarily a deal breaker if you're a physical dominator like DK Metcalf or Mike Evans. But for a rookie, that margin is tighter. You can win with contested catches in college. In the NFL, if you're not separating, you're fighting for every inch. And every rep against NFL corners is a battle. That's why his development hinges on how well he adapts to press coverage, especially once preseason games begin. In practice, you can get away with a bad release or a slow break if the defense is playing off. But in live action, if you're not crisp, if you don't finish routes, you're invisible. The staff is going to give him chances, especially if the top of the receiver depth chart is in flux. But those chances won't last forever. If he keeps stacking good padded days like he did in the rain, though he'll force his way onto the field. That size is hard to coach, so if the technique catches up, watch out. And then there's Matt Milano, one of the most respected guys in that locker room, a tone setter, a leader. And watching him blow up run plays again makes you forget for a second just how serious his injury was last year. But then you watch the passing drills, and you remember. You see a guy who's still explosive, still aggressive, but who's not quite trusting that knee in space yet. 1-and-ones are brutal for linebackers, no doubt. But when you're 6 yards behind a running back and struggling to shift direction, that tells a story. The hope is that with more time and more reps, he'll regain some of that lateral movement. But the truth is injuries like this don't always heal clean. And when your game is built on versatility, being able to do everything, well, even a slight drop in agility can change your role. That's where scheme comes into play. McDermott and the staff might need to adjust how they use Milano this season. Let him attack downhill more. Limit his coverage responsibilities. Use more nickel packages with faster DBs in the box to compensate. It's not ideal, but it's smart coaching. You adapt. You don't ask a player to do something his body no longer excels at. You highlight the things he can still dominate at. A Milano, even at 80 or 90%, is still better than most linebackers in the league. Ultimately, what we're seeing at this camp is a reminder of how fragile the line is between a championship roster and a team that's almost there. Injuries don't just take bodies off the field. They alter chemistry, they shift responsibilities, and they test depth. And in a league as competitive as the NFL, where one game can determine whether you're hosting a playoff matchup or playing it on the road, those margins matter. The Bills know this. That's why they're being conservative. That's why guys like Bass, Brown, Kincaid, and Milano aren't being rushed back. Because this team isn't built for September. It's built for January. But the road to January is brutal, and it's already begun. So now it's all about management, load management, rep management, pain management, and mental management. Because if the Bills can weather this early storm, if they can keep their key guys upright and get their depth developed, this is still one of the most complete rosters in the conference. But it's a big if. And every practice, every report, every tweak or strain is another reminder that in this league, nothing is guaranteed. The fans feel it. The players feel it. The staff knows it. And that's why even in a practice session, in late July, the stakes feel just a little bit higher than usual. Before we dive back in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us keep delivering the latest Buffalo Bills updates straight to your screen. And hey, don't hold back. Let us know your thoughts on today's news down in the comments. In a surprising twist that has sent shockwaves through the NFL landscape, rumors are swirling that Myles Garrett, the dominant pass rusher and face of the Cleveland Browns defense, could be trading his brown and orange for the blue and red of the Buffalo Bills. While nothing has been officially announced, insiders and sources close to the situation have started whispering about a potential blockbuster move that could redefine the defensive dynamics of both teams. Garrett has long been the cornerstone of the Browns' defense, known for his relentless pressure on quarterbacks and his game-changing plays. His presence has been pivotal in Cleveland's defensive identity, and losing him would represent a seismic shift for the franchise. However, rumors suggest that the Bills have been aggressively pursuing the star defensive end, seeking to bolster their pass rush and add a veteran leader to their already impressive defensive unit. The Buffalo Bills, coming off a strong season and with high hopes for a Super Bowl run, are reportedly willing to make significant investments to upgrade their defense. Garrett's skill set perfectly aligns with Buffalo's strategic needs, potentially giving them a fearsome edge in pressuring opposing quarterbacks and creating turnovers. The whispers of this move come amid growing speculation that the Bills want to fortify their defense to complement their explosive offense. From Cleveland's perspective, the potential departure of Garrett could be a sign of shifting priorities or a strategic decision to rebuild parts of their roster. Whether this is driven by contract negotiations, salary cap considerations, or Garrett's own desire for a new challenge remains unclear. Yet the buzz around the league suggests that the Browns might be open to parting ways with their star defender if the right deal materializes. While the deal is far from official, the mere possibility has ignited passionate debates among fans and analysts. Could Buffalo's defense become one of the league's most feared units with Garrett in the mix? Would Cleveland's defense suffer a devastating blow? Or could this be the start of a new chapter with fresh talent stepping up? As teams enter critical phases of roster building, this rumored Garrett to Bills move is shaping up to be one of the most talked about storylines of the offseason. Stay tuned as more details emerge. This potential pass rush shakeup could change the balance of power in the AFC and set the stage for an electrifying upcoming season. That's a wrap for now. Why? If you enjoyed the video and want to stay on top of all things Buffalo Bills, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We'd love to hear what you think in the comments. See you in the next update.